Bharatiya Janata Party, Mr. Jaitley is the Honorable Finance Minister and Minister of Corporate Affairs in the Government of India. He is a senior advocate in the Supreme Court and a former Additional Solicitor General of India. Mr. Jaitley previously held the cabinet portfolios of Commerce and Industry and Law and Justice and briefly served as the Minister of Defence. He also served as a member to the Board of Governors of Asian Development Bank and as the General Secretary of the BJP in 2002 and then again in 2004. He has also served as the leader of opposition in the Rajya Sabha. Mr. Jaitley is a strategic planner for the BJP and as the General Secretary has managed multiple assembly elections which proved victorious for the BJP. He was re-elected to the Rajya Sabha in April 2012 for his third term. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Honorable Union Minister Mr. Arun Jaitley, who will now deliver the Justice Konda Madhava Memorial Lecture 2016.
My colleague in the government, Shri Arun Jaitley, the former Governor of the Reserve Bank, Dr. Reddy, Chairperson of the Apollo Group of Hospitals, Dr. Pratap Reddy, Professor Reddy, members of Justice Madhava Reddy's family, some of our very distinguished judges, the Justice Shri Reddy, ladies and gentlemen. When I was still a relatively younger lawyer, I had heard of the formidable reputation of Justice Madhava Reddy. And there are certain opportunities in the career of a lawyer or a judge by which he gets identified with events of history. Though he had a great illustrious career, as we've been told, born in the family of an illustrious father, started his life involved in the struggle for the integration of Hyderabad, young lawyer, successful lawyer thereafter, a judge of the Andhra Pradesh High Court, a Chief Justice and thereafter the Chief Justice of Mumbai High Court, the first chairperson who established the institution called the Central Administrative Tribunal. And I first got to see him when after retiring he started practicing in the Supreme Court. He always appeared to be very calm. He was never excitable. But as a lawyer and an individual, one could always weigh his intellectual strength, the way he spoke, the way he discussed, and the way he argued. As I mentioned earlier, the recall of a personality normally gets identified with certain events in history. And I think the most important moment in legal history or jurisprudence that Justice Madhava Reddy got identified with was during his tenure as the Chief Justice of the Mumbai High Court, when he presided over a bench which heard the legendary case which is known as the escorts case. The case had some political overtones and involved very serious legal issues. Those legal issues, Dr. Reddy also deal with the subject that you are interested in. And you mentioned of economy and the law itself. India's companies had a very narrow holding of the promoter of the company. Some of the companies which were held by promoters, the promoters had a very minuscule shareholding. And they used to remain in management essentially on the strength of the shareholding that the financial institutions had. In the case of escorts and the DCM bills, it used to be LIC and some public sector banks, the UTI, and the managements were in control. The political events which I remember from those days were, and these have subsequently been recorded in books and autobiographies which the then participants have written. The Prime Minister in the early 80s signaled to one of the investors outside the country that if he made a hostile bid to take over escorts and DCM, he would be free to do so. A hostile bid was made for the takeover of these companies. And as a part of that hostile bid, the financial institutions would have altered their voting. And therefore the managements in control sought to raise a legal issue before the Bombay High Court as to when the government is a shareholder through financial institutions, a state instrumentality is a shareholder. Does it have the freedom to act like any other commercial shareholder? Vote whichever way it wanted in a EGM, destabilize an existing management, or be an instrumentality of a state, its power to act as a shareholder, its freedom would be restricted. For good reasons, it could do so, and not otherwise. Justice Madhava, Reddy presiding over the bench, gave a very scholarly judgment, saying, no, the state as a shareholder does not enjoy the same freedom which a commercial shareholder would. The matter went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court did not favor that view and took a contrarian view. But then events overtook with the assassination of the then Prime Minister in the mid-1980s. And the successor Prime Minister did not favor the takeover, if you recollect. And the issue really became academic. But I think when Justice Madhava Reddy, post his retirement, started practicing in the Supreme Court, he used to literally walk with a formidable reputation of the judge who had delivered a monumental judgment against the then government. Even though the view did not find favor with the Supreme Court. But I am sure, as you mentioned just now, in 1991, economic changes took place. From a regulated economy, we moved to a more market economy. That case was argued during the days of a regulated economy. And therefore, if it was to be repeated in today's liberalized economy, I think the jury would still be out whether Justice Madhava Reddy's view was the correct one or Justice Chirappa Reddy's view in the Supreme Court was the correct one. I am sure that scholars on the subject would continue to reflect on this particular subject. I just wish to trace out the history as we have seen post 1947, the freedom, as far as the economy is concerned. When we attained independence, by and large, the underdeveloped world, the developing world, the third world as they called it, had always preferred a more regulated economy. And a regulated economy inherently was also Pandit Nehru's preference at that time. Probably the kind of resource available in the market itself was also limited. And therefore, in the mindset and environment, whatever law which integrated with the economy at that time was regulatory in character. And therefore, you had the Industrial Development Regulation Act, industry where licensing was made necessary. And the idea behind that object was, if you wanted to set up an industry and do business, you could only do it if the state permitted you to do it. You were not free to do your own business. Size was considered as evil. And therefore the entire concept which goes with the market economy of economies of scale was almost considered anachronic. And therefore the MRPP law, your exchange laws, all regulated the size of the economy. This trend continued. Even though in 1970s the world started, a very large part of the world started dissenting with this trend. Contract labor law, even in the world in the mid-70s, started realizing that outsourcing also had virtues. but we were still constrained by the conventional thinking. And this conventional thinking continued. For instance, one of the laws which we brought in, now if you analyze the law, probably we may, with the wisdom of hindsight, believe that it was probably not well thought out of. As a part of our endeavor to look socialist in character, one of the laws we brought was the Urban Land Ceiling Act. So depending upon the categorization of the city that you were in, the land resource had to be locked up. Nobody could own land, vacant land beyond a particular point. And if you did so, the land had to be surrendered and it would go purportedly for the benefit of the weaker sections. Effectively what happened was, real estate development, housing, because we locked up the land resource, came to a standstill. And did large chunks of land acquired under this go to the poor people? Virtually nothing went to the poor people. So the object was not achieved. And at the same time, that urbanization, housing, creation of more townships, more cities, in the mid-70s virtually came to a standstill. And this law finally got repealed around the year 2000, when we realized that we need to put large chunks of land into the market so that the land could be developed upon and people could get much better housing itself. In fact, the mindset which regulated the economy itself was reflected in law. If you open up the constitution which was drafted and look at the fundamental rights under Article 19 and the exceptions to them, the right to do business and trade, the exception mentioned in Article 19(6) is state monopolies are permissible and a monopoly created by the state in its own favor is not liable to be challenged. Now, if we just look at the principle of what happened during this period, as to whether, and now with the wisdom of hindsight, analyze whether these state monopolies really helped us, we can take an illustration. Let's take telecom. The MTNL and the BSNL enjoyed a monopoly for almost 50 years. And in 50 years of monopoly, telephony reached 0.8% of India's population, less than 1%. When you brought in the private sector, in 20 years it has crossed 80%. And therefore the mindset which dictated the economy at that stage, where state monopolies were considered to be in larger public interest. Telecom is a living example where a state monopoly could provide telephony only to less than 1% of the people, where you had 50 years of state monopoly. And you can take it sector by sector. The world got to see television in 1948, we had to wait till the 1970s. And wait till the 1990s before we could see anything other than state television, the Doodle. The airlines, a state monopoly run on taxpayers' money, so we kept on taxing the people. And the best a city, if you look at the pre-private participation days, even a city like Hyderabad would have got 1 or 2 flights in a day. So did those monopolies and the law that controls them really subserve the public interest that it was intended to do so? Why is it that we suddenly had to change in 1991? In my belief, there are 3 good reasons why it happened. Normally, the one reason which is mentioned is we had the immediate foreign exchange crisis, and it was a reform which was dictated upon by the crisis. But I think there were 2 other inherent reasons. Besides the 1991 foreign exchange crisis, which you mentioned, Dr. Reddy, that you were the Joint Secretary dealing with the crisis at that time. I think besides the US and the European economies, in the second part of the last century, after the war, you had Taiwan which picked up, you had Japan which picked up significantly, Korea picked up, Singapore picked up. And these were all economies in Asia which started becoming important regional economic powers. The proponents of the state control and the left intelligentsia rejected these 4 examples on the ground that the size of population in these countries is very small. And therefore those experiments could not be replicated in India. And I think what put a stop to that argument was not the success of these four economies, but was the changeover of the model in China and the success that the changed model in China achieved. This reform started coming in the 1980s. A country which had larger population than India, almost the same living standards, maybe even inferior. And then when this started moving, if China can do it, why can't India do it? And there was no response to this answer. There was no answer to this argument. And obviously the third reason was that compared to the rest of the world, particularly the progressive nations, the difference between those countries and India was far more stark. And therefore, in 1991, I think a cumulative effect of these factors had an impact. India still had not had the intellectual honesty to say that the model we followed from 1947 till 1991 was at least partly flawed. The reforms could have dated back at least 2 decades. But hopefully the jury on this subject will always be out, and this will be a matter for historians and analysts to write this. And as you rightly mentioned just now in your opening presidential remarks, you required in 1991, the changes that you needed were obvious. You needed to dismantle in the first instance the regulatory mechanism by which licensing was required. And therefore, the first law which had to be amended was the IDR. You could now set up an industry, except some very rare cases, without the permission of the state. Udyog Bhavan started increasingly losing relevance. You then integrated India's economy with the rest of the world. Again, the point which you just now made in your opening comments, that laws are domestic but capital is global. And therefore, to generate a large part of economic activity, you need capital from wherever the capital flows can come. And therefore, in many areas, we started inviting capital into India because capital itself would be the starting point of economic activity. We thought our taxation had to be made more relevant. And then, of course, a bolder decision that our currency also had to be realistic. And our currency merely to be overpriced and then make the economy uncompetitive was at least economically not a very rational argument. I think when these initial reforms took place, the conventionalists then struck back. And we've seen some recent interviews and statements from Dr. Manmohan Singh saying that at one stage he found himself completely isolated in trying to defend himself within the government. When in 1996 the government changed, I think even though there was a left participation in the United Front government, one positive aspect which got carried over to that regime was further rationalization of taxes. And I think that was the most significant part of that government, which was short-lived. So the tax structures became more reasonable, income tax became more reasonable. Higher taxation would make the economy more sluggish, and therefore you must have more reasonable levels of taxation. Then when Mr. Vajpayee came to power, I think there were very challenging moments. One of the first difficult decisions that he had to take was that we had taken the bold decision under the earlier government to open out telephony, the example which I gave. But we had a flawed model that you will charge very high revenue. And courts also believed higher revenue was identified with larger public interest. Higher revenue could actually go contrary to public interest. If you charge 16 rupees a minute for a telephone, there would be no success story in telephony because people won't buy a telephone. And therefore, courts also had difficulty in adjusting to this changed thinking. When the government said we'll have revenue sharing and not license fee. License fee means costlier telephony, which is not conducive with reforms. And ultimately, history vindicated that decision. I think that was a bold decision for the government to take, because of which the success story on telecom became important. Thereafter, I think He went on increasing the permissibility of foreign capital in the country. I think regulatory reforms, shifting the power away from the government into regulatory authorities. This was an important change. And one of the reasons which necessitated the change was government still was a participant in many of these businesses. So government had a telephone company, it could not be a regulator, it couldn't be a decision maker. In the insurance sector, the government was a participant. It couldn't be a regulator, so you needed an independent regulator. In electricity, government was a participant, so it couldn't be a regulator. So you needed a regulator because a competitor can't be a regulator. And the government wore two hats, one of a government, one of a competitor. And therefore the regulatory reforms came about. And then the advantage of the liberalized economy will be felt if you concentrate on infrastructure. I think the infrastructure initiative was an important one. And then this larger question was raised. Which are the areas in which we require state monopolies? And which are the areas in which we require government or people's resources to be locked up? And therefore should there be divergent privatization? A very important discussion started. And even today that discussion is on. When Mrs. Thatcher tried it in England, her adversaries in the Labour Party then said you are selling the family silver. But at the end of the day it has to be accepted that these are resources which belong to the government. In effect belong to the people. And therefore when government resources belong to the people, should the people of India have their money stuck up in a cable company? Or should Hyderabad get one more highway connected to Bangalore or to Pune? Both are resources of the state. And therefore government resources should be locked up in a business where private sector is entered? Or should the people's money now be spent on an alternative area where a larger public interest would be served? So privatization and disinvestment doesn't mean you are throwing anything into the market. You are taking away money from one resource and then putting that money in another resource where it could serve a larger public interest. I think this went on. 2004, I think there was a somewhat change in the policy framing. Reforms in the capital market in some areas went on. But the alternate thinking of entitlements was born. Should we entitle people? Now there could be an argument both ways. The argument in favor is that once the state gets resources, you must create some benefit for the weaker section. The alternate view is that this itself would make the economy, the idea is to create more jobs so that people work and earn rather than just be entitled to an entitlement. So this debate went on. I think today we have now emerged at a situation where India consciously seems to be have by and large accepted that the course which we adopted from 1991 onwards certainly has made the economy much bigger. Unquestionably we look much better. Poverty rates have declined, but there is still a long distance to be followed. And therefore the current direction from getting more investment to empowering regions more, the importance of federalism itself has increased. But then several changes in law are still to be required. So what are the changes we've seen? The reform so far had not involved an answer to a question how resource allocation takes place. Resource could be mineral or it could be any public resource belonging to the state or the people. And therefore can it be just given away by an arbitrary process or must there be some fairness in its allocation and some criteria in its allocation? So we've changed our laws accordingly. Taxation to be made more assessee friendly. The whole object of these entitlements and subsidies is that they must reach the people to whom they are targeted. The rich and the wealthy would not be entitled to them. So you now have the unique identity mechanism being used for that particular purpose. Increased emphasis on physical infrastructure, on rural infrastructure, on social security. Several newer areas such as dealing with just as entry into businesses has become easier through bankruptcies. Exits have to become easier. That is where we stand today. And when we look at the legislative legal framework, I have two comments to generally make. If we compare the pre-91 and the post-91 situation as far as the economy is concerned, and we closely analyze from an academic analysis, what does one conclude? There is one lesson we have as far as governments are, and this is governments across from top to bottom. Inherently, governments have an urge to control. Governments have an urge to regulate. Governments have an urge to become overbearing. All this is somewhat inconsistent with the post-1991. Governments then have to become facilitators. And therefore, there are areas from which governments must realize at times when we see even in our legislative bodies, any crisis takes place, the first tendency is that the government must intervene, the government must control, the government must take over, and there must be knee-jerk reactions. I think in a large number of these cases, government's urge to control has to be restrained. That is in consonance with a more liberal framework in which you trust your people a lot. Now I'll give a very illustration which is an event of the day. We must have all read in newspapers and heard about the current ongoing issue that by 31st of July, a very large number of NGOs are expected to file some returns under the Lokpal Act. How did this happen? At a time when the Anna Hazare movement was on during the last government, a draft Lokpal bill was prepared. And one of the provisions of the bill was that the Lokpal must also extend to sectors outside the government, and all NGOs were included. I happen to be a member of the committee, and I had objected to the idea. In fact, I called it at that time because there was a political confrontation on. So I called it a revenge provision. I said, don't go so far. So finally, the government relented a little, excluded all NGOs which were collecting money from domestic sources, but any NGOs collecting money from foreign sources or from government revenue. Now that enforcement was being postponed, and finally the D-Day arrived. Now everybody, including the then draftsmen of the bill, are now saying, did we commit a mistake? Have we gone a bit too far? And therefore, is it necessary to have an organization which will keep an eye on everybody? And I think I give this example because it's a very typical example of a current issue where most people now feel that I think this was a little excessive to have a provision of this kind, but it came out of an urge to control. And therefore, whether it's capital or it's labor-related issues, I think we have to start resisting this temptation. Amongst our various responsibilities is also the Department of Corporate Affairs which administers the Companies Act. The Companies Act was redone in 2013 and it has become the most regulated area where a lot of people feel that it is almost impossible to run a company. In fact, some people have told me it is better to go back to the partnership model. So my first act in this department was to bring about several changes by subordinate legislation. Some 14 provisions I changed. And finally, so much of the control had to be taken out of the Companies Act that I now had to appoint a committee. The committee has to give a recommendation. There are some 70 or 80 amendments which I have now proposed to dilute in 2016 a law which we enacted only in 2013. Because the idea behind the 2013 law was how do we control those who are doing. I think governments have to control the urge and restrain the urge to corrupt. The second, and I'm glad a large number of our very distinguished President and former judges are also here, members of the bar are here. Just as there is an urge to control by the government, there is a corresponding urge to expand as far as the judiciary. And that urge to expand, like the government's urge to control, is also inconsistent with the idea of a more market-centric and a reform. And I can give you several examples. The whole object behind the arbitration law was that parties choose their own forum, the forum decides, and courts don't interfere. And that's the practice world over. Our urge to expand saw a judgment from the apex court where the horizons of interference in an intervention in an award were increased. The effect was that in all international contracts, contracted parties started saying Indian law shall not apply, Indian jurisdiction will not apply. So the venue of arbitration will be foreign. The substantive and the procedural laws will be foreign, something which was of very high cost to the Indian economy and to the Indian industry. We've now had to amend the law in order to restrict and narrow down the scope of interference. Now to retain power to intervene is one thought, but in a liberalized economy, the interference itself could be counterproductive to the whole object of investment. Let me now mention an area which requires probably an evolution in judicial approach over a period of time. In the 1970s, when the judicial institution adopted an activist approach, some very landmark judgments came. And all of us, including myself, in that environment hailed those judgments. Now, one of the great judgments was Justice Bhagwati's, and that approach went on, where we expanded the definition of the state under Article 12, and all instrumentalities of the state would be bound by the same constraint. That state would be. And the idea behind the judgment was very honorable and legally correct, and therefore these bodies must also act rationally, act fairly, and so on. In a regulated environment, probably it was the correct view. So every public sector in India today is admittedly a state. In a competitive environment, what is the effect of that law? At that time, most public sectors functioned under a monopoly environment. Today, all those public sectors are functioning in a competitive way. But the interpretation of Article 12 is the same. And in day-to-day administration, the effective implementation of that view has become commercially unviable for the public sector. And I'll give you living examples of this. Today in the banking industry, you have foreign banks operating, you have private sector banks operating, you have internet banking, you have payment gateways, and you have the old PSUs functioning. Now the result of that judgment was, and then followed a series of judgments which lawyers and judges would understand the Ade Hasiya line of judgments. How do you recruit your staff? So world over the principle is, for recruiting the best, you have campus recruitment. So every private sector bank, the ICICI, the HDFC, and everybody goes to the campuses every year and picks up the best. So the state bank said, well, I'll also do the same. Why should I not get the best? So when they went there, this law was shown to them by the courts. And said ICICI can do it, HDFC can do it, Axis Bank can do it. The foreign banks can do it, so they will go to the campuses and recruit the best. But you hold your written examination and the interview marks should not be more than 15%. So only the second best and the third best were left to write that exam. So inherently in a competitive environment, these instrumentalities of the state have been pushed to a situation where they can't recruit the best because the best get recruited in a competitive environment by the private sector itself, even if the salary structures are the same. And therefore, if Air India is to compete with the private sector airlines, if the Shipping Corporation of India is to compete with the private shipping companies, each of their reasons for functioning and commercial considerations will have to be dictated by a different set of considerations, which have now in a competitive environment proved to be counterproductive to their commercial activities. And therefore, what was true of the public sector in a monopoly environment becomes a liability in a competitive environment. And that is where law and economy will have to interplay itself. And I think there are areas where just as I mentioned in the arbitration case, you similarly had the judgment in relation to the National Tax Tribunal, where what is a better option for a tax tribunal? Now that is something which is outside the domain of the judicial institution. In fact, I am one of those who strongly holds the view that just as independence of the judiciary is very vital and extremely important, in policy, the executive gets a primacy. In legislation, the legislature gets a primacy. No one institution can allow the other functions to be usurped or in any sense weakened. Therefore, just as independence of judiciary is a part of the basic structure and very vital, so is democracy. So is primacy of an elected government. So is primacy of parliament. So is the primacy of executive in policy domains. And therefore, instruments such as a committee of retired judges to advise on policy, and that policy become a part of a judicial direction, actually goes to the roots. It's in the roots of separation of powers itself. And it's extremely important in the management of the economy in particular that there are areas where the lines are not obliterated. The power of judicial review will belong to the courts. Policy domain will belong to the executive. By and large, courts in India have always accepted that principle. And therefore, even when constitutional law in relation to these commercial matters is expanded, we will now have to, as we evolve further, just as governments and parliaments will have to learn that they have to restrain this urge for control, courts will have to understand that this urge to expand is also restrained. That is in consonance with the changing norms of management of the economy world over. And I am sure the statesmanship in our institutions will always persuade them to move on with the times, and probably we'll see a much better India. So thank you very much for this.